In this video, you'll learn the second of 3 ways on how to solve a quadratic equation. So first, you might be asking yourself, maybe you forgot, what is a quadratic equation? Well, I'll refresh your memory. It's a function that has x squared as its highest power. So, if you see any equation in which one of the variables is being raised to the exponent of 2, then that means it's a quadratic. So you got to use one of these 3 methods to solve it. Now, in the previous video, we talked about the square root method, which only works in certain scenarios when there is no b, there's no bx term. Factoring, you'll learn in the next video, which doesn't always work, but is really easy in certain cases. And then, in this video, you'll learn how to use the quadratic formula, which is sometimes the most time-consuming, and it could be I want to say difficult, but it's more work to do the quadratic formula than the other 2 methods. But the cool part about the quadratic formula is that it works for any quadratic. So when in doubt, use the quadratic formula. And you know, if you could factor it, do it, but sometimes you can't factor it. So again, the quadratic formula is a fail-safe method that if you know how to do this, you could solve any quadratic equation. It's a pretty awesome feeling if you ask me. Alright. So, what is the quadratic formula? So, when there is a bx term and you can't factor it, you're going to use the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So, that might look like a lot of gibberish right now, but you'll get used to it. One good thing is that you'll always be given b, a, and c. So, if you can identify a, b, and c, you literally plug and chug, meaning you plug the numbers in, and you finish, and you evaluate, and you solve, and you figure out what x is. So, what are a, b, and c? Well, a, b, and c are used to represent coefficients in front of your variables. So, in order to solve a quadratic equation, you must make sure it's in standard form first. So, it's not always going to be looking nice and pretty like that, ax squared plus bx plus c. And later, we'll see some problems where it isn't pretty. But you can always clean it up, bring all your variables and constants, all your numbers, over to one side by adding or subtracting, setting and then combining like terms, making sure it was set equal to 0. Once you've done that, then you look at the number in front of x squared, that's a, the number in front of x is b, and then the number not next to any variable is c. So, we're going to solve 3 quadratic equations. So for all of them, feel free to pause before we do the problem, and you could try it on your own. Or if you want to see 1 or 2, if you want to see me do the first 2, and then the last one you want to pause and try on your own, feel free, it's up to you. Now, number 1 is nice because it's already put into standard form for us. We know that since it's written as 5x squared minus 3x plus 2 equal to 0, because it's equal to 0 and all your like terms are combined, that means that a is going to be 5, b is going to be negative 3. All right? If I can go back to the previous page and you can look at standard form again, notice how there's a plus sign in front of bx. So if there's ever a negative sign in front of bx, that means it's really plus a negative b. Same thing with c. And if there's ever a negative in front of the a, then that means a is negative. So just be aware that a and b could both be positive or negative. Sorry about that. So, again, a is 5, b is negative 3, and c is 2. Alright, your next step is to write the quadratic formula. So, it's the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. Now, that's kind of hard to memorize. I kind of got it down now because I'm a math teacher, but back when I was first learning this, I always found it difficult to memorize. So there's a couple different ways you can memorize it. One thing that I think is really helpful is to write the equation out in terms of a, b, and c at the beginning of every problem. The more times you write it, the better you'll remember it. Think back to when you were first learning certain words in elementary school. Your teacher would have you write it over and over again. So I would really suggest doing that until you get the hang of it. There's also catchy songs and stuff out there, and you could just Google or YouTube quadratic formula, and there's a lot of catchy songs out there to help you memorize it. Alright, so once you memorized it, wrote it down, identified A, B, and C, Now for the easy part, we're just going to plug it in and solve. So again, this represents what our possible values for x are, that if we plugged it back into this original equation, it would be true. It would all equal 0. So the opposite of b, since b is negative 3, would be 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now I like to just square b right in the first step, so I'm just going to write 9. Now b squared will always be positive, because remember in the previous video, any number squared will be positive. Negative 3 times negative 3 will be positive 9, just like 3 times 3 is positive 9. Now, minus 4ac. So minus 4 times 5 times 2. All over 2a. And a is 5. Now, we're going to simplify. So work inside the square root first. So inside the square root symbol, it is, and then, it's 9 minus 4 times 5 times 2, which would be 4 times 5 is 20, times 2 is 40. Oops. Sorry about that. Alright, now you could simplify the bottom and what's in the square root symbol. So what's inside the square root symbol, 9 minus 40, well, that's going to be negative 31. And then all over 10. Now, notice how you have the square root of a negative number. Well, you can't take the square root of a negative number, because there's no number that you can multiply by itself to get a negative. So, whenever you have a negative for your discriminant, and discriminant just means what's under your square root symbol, b squared minus 4ac, you're going to have no solution. So this would be no solution because of that negative sign right there. Alright, let's try another one. Alright, let's do another one. Now again, if you feel confident that you could do this, pause the video, try it, and then hit play when you want to see a solution, or do it along with me. Now, what's different about this problem is that the original equation is not in standard form. So let's put it in standard form. So all you got to do is bring all your variables and constants over to one side. It doesn't matter whether it's the left or the right side. Personally, I like to always bring it over to the side that will make x squared positive. It just makes my life a little easier. So, in this case, I'm going to bring everything over to the right, because 12x squared is on the right and 9x squared is on the left. So I look for the bigger coefficient of x squared, and I want to get my variables and constants over to that side. So I'm going to start off by subtracting 9x squared on both sides. And while I'm at it, I'll also subtract 2x from both sides. So when we simplify, we see 9x squared minus 9x squared gets canceled. 2x minus 2x gets canceled. So we got a big fat 0 on the left. And on the right, we have 12x squared minus 9x squared. So that's 3x squared. And then x minus 2x is minus 3x. And then plus 5 is just plus 5. So now we need to identify a, b, and c. So a is just 3, b is negative 3, and c is 5. So now we're going to plug all of these numbers, a, b, and c, into the quadratic formula. So again, it's the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now just to save time, I'm not going to write it out. I'm just going to plug it in, but you should write it out. So the opposite of b is 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 9, minus 4a, 3, times c, 5, all over 2a, 2 times 3. Now, I'm going to simplify. So 3 plus or minus the square root of 9. Now, you don't do 9 minus 4 yet, because remember, the order operations, you have to multiply first. So you have to multiply 4 times 3 times 5 together first. So 4 times 3 times 5 comes out to 60, all over 2 times 3, and you get 6. Now, if we simplify further, you get x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 51, all over 6. And this again is just a coincidence. This doesn't happen a lot, But since the number under the square root symbol is negative, that means again there is no solution. So let's do one where there is a solution, hopefully, and it'll be this last one. This last one, I'm going to try to bring everything over to the left side, because again, I know it will make my x squared positive. And again, it doesn't matter. You can bring it to the left or the right. So I'm going to add 4x squared on both sides. So there's nothing really to add that to. And I'm also going to subtract 11x from both sides. So we have that cancels 4x and negative 4x, 11x and negative 11x. So we have 4x squared and minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. So a is 4, b is negative 5, and c is negative 3. So if we plug all that into the quadratic formula, we get the opposite of b, so 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 25, minus 4ac, negative 3. It's really important to pay attention to signs, because if you don't, you can get a drastically different solution from what it's supposed to get, from what you're supposed to get. Over 2 times 4. Alright? First, multiply 4ac together. So we have 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 4 times 4 times 3, which comes out to 48. But it's not 4 times 4 times 3, it's 4 times 4 times negative 3, so that'll come out to negative 48. So we have 25 minus negative 48, which is just like 25 plus 48. So let's write it over 8 first, because that's 2 times 4. And now we'll finish up here. So x could equal 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 48, because 25 minus negative 48 is the same thing as 25 plus 48, is 73. All over 8. And then you get x equals 5 plus root 73 over 8 is one solution, or x equals 5 minus root 73 over 8. And the only other thing that could possibly happen is that if that number under the square root symbol could be simplified. If it can be, simplify it. Like for say it was the square root of 4. Then you would have two answers. Since the square root of 4 is 2, it would be 5 minus 2 over 8, or 5 plus 2 over 8. Alright, I hope this video is helpful. One last thing I want to mention is that sometimes they don't ask you for a fraction like I've provided for you. They ask you to leave your answer as a decimal. In that case, you would just type this into your calculator exactly as it looks, and you get a decimal. So you do 5 plus root 73 divided by 8 to get one solution, 5 minus root 73 divided by 8 to get another solution. Alright, that's it. Hope that video was helpful. I hope you're looking forward to the last video of this little trifecta trilogy of quadratic videos on factoring. Alright, have a good one.